The Great Hall of Zephyria Prime stretched for nearly a kilometer, its crystal walls reaching toward a purple sky dotted with 3 moons. Representatives from 12 different species sat around the massive circular table, each delegation speaking in their native tongues through universal translators. The air buzzed with tension and the constant hum of alien voices. Admiral Kethvar of the Vorthok Empire stood at the center of the room. His gray skin bore the ritual scars of 1,000 battles, and his forearms moved with practiced precision as he operated the holographic display. The image that appeared above the table showed a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star. Earth, Kethvar announced, his voice carrying easily through the vast chamber. The 3rd planet of what the natives call the Sol system. Population approximately 8 billion humans. Technology level classified as primitive by all galactic standards. Chancellor Mordeth of Zephyria leaned forward in his floating chair. His elongated skull and pale blue skin marked him as one of the oldest species in the galaxy. And why exactly are we discussing this backwater world, Admiral? Kethavar's mandibles clicked in what passed for a smile among his people. Because these primitives have had the audacity to send us a warning. The hall erupted in various sounds of amusement. The insectoid hive queen Zakth's chittering laugh echoed from her section of the table, while the gaseous beings of the ethereal collective produced harmonic vibrations that translated as mockery. Even the normally stoic rock people of granite, Prime shifted in what could only be described as stone-based chuckling. A warning? Chancellor Mordeth's voice carried clear amusement. From a species that has barely left their own planet? Indeed. Kethvar manipulated the display and a new image appeared. It showed crude metal vessels with primitive chemical engines. These are their most advanced warships. They use controlled explosions to move through space. Their largest vessel is less than 400 meters long. They have no energy shields, no plasma weapons, no faster-than-light travel. Ambassador Veltar of the Serpentine Coalition raised her scaled head. What could such beings possibly warn us about? Kethvar activated an audio file. The voice that emerged spoke in heavily accented galactic standard, clearly struggling with the pronunciation. This is the final message from Earth to the Galactic Hegemony Council. We have observed your expansion into territories we have claimed. We have watched your fleets destroy civilizations that refuse to submit. We will not allow this to continue. This is our last warning. Withdraw from human space, or face the consequences. The laughter that followed was deafening. Delegate Prexnor of the machine worlds emitted electronic sounds that his translator rendered as mechanical amusement. Consequences? What consequences could a species of chemical fuel users possibly pose to our civilization? They claim ownership of 17 star systems, Kethvar continued. Systems that our surveys show contain valuable mineral deposits, and at least 4 habitable worlds suitable for our expansion needs. Queen Zakth's multifaceted eyes glittered with interest. The humans could make excellent workers for our mining operations. Their physiology appears suitable for heavy labor, and their primitive nature suggests they would be easily controlled. My thoughts exactly, Your Majesty. Kethvar nodded toward the insectoid ruler. However, they seem to believe they can dictate terms to the hegemony. Chancellor Mordeth stood, his ancient frame still imposing despite his age. This is absurd. A species that cannot even achieve faster-than-light travel thinks they can challenge 12 galactic civilizations. Their arrogance exceeds even that of the extinct Malthorians. What intelligence do we have on their military capabilities? Asked General Haxtor of the Warcast Dominion, his scarred features showing professional interest. Kethvar brought up new displays showing Earth's military installations. Their most powerful weapons use nuclear fission and fusion, primitive by our standards but capable of devastating their own planet. They have approximately 15,000 nuclear warheads scattered across their world. Directed at each other, no doubt, observed Ambassador Veltar with typical serpentine cynicism. A species that hasn't even unified their own planet. Correct? They maintain over 190 separate political entities, many of which are in various states of conflict with each other. Their military forces are fragmented and focus primarily on planetary defense. Trade Minister Golvan of the Merchant Federation adjusted his mechanical implants. What about their space-based defenses? Orbital platforms, battle stations? None of significance. They have a few small space stations for research purposes and some communication satellites. Their moon has a small research outpost with perhaps 50 personnel. The crystalline representative of the Silicon Syndicate pulsed with colored lights that translated as amusement. They warn us from a position of absolute weakness. This is either madness or supreme ignorance. Or both, added Chancellor Mordeth. The question is, how to respond to this entertainment. Admiral Kethvar straightened to his full height. I propose a demonstration of force. Send a fleet to their system, not to destroy them outright, but to show them the futility of their position. Once they see the power of even a single hegemony battle group, they will surrender unconditionally. An excellent suggestion, agreed General Haxtor. It would also serve as a reminder to other primitive species who might consider similar foolishness. Queen Zacht clicked her approval. Yes, shock and awe followed by complete subjugation. The survivors can serve our expansion needs. Chancellor Mordeth raised his hand for silence. All in favor of Admiral Kethvar's proposal? The vote was unanimous. 12 species, representing the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, agreed that a show of force would quickly resolve the human problem. Which fleet should we send? Asked Trade Minister Golvan. The Third Fleet, Kethvar replied without hesitation. 47 capital ships and their escorts. More than sufficient to intimidate a primitive species, but not so large as to suggest we take their threat seriously. Perfect, Chancellor Mordeth nodded. Admiral, you will personally command this mission. Show these humans their place in the galactic order. Far from Zephyria Prime on the dark side of Earth's moon, Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the control room of a facility that officially did not exist. The chamber was carved from solid rock, its walls lined with equipment that seemed to blend human. Engineering with something far older and more sophisticated. The transmission has been sent, reported Lieutenant Commander Torres from his communication station. All frequencies, multiple languages, including Galactic Standard. Dr. Chen nodded, her dark eyes reflecting the glow of dozens of monitoring screens. Any response? Negative. Radio silence from all known hegemony frequencies. Through the transparent aluminum window, Chen could see the vast excavation site that stretched for kilometers beneath the lunar surface. Structures of impossible geometry rose from the depths, their surfaces covered in symbols that predated human civilization by millions of years. The archaeological team had been working here for 30 years, slowly uncovering technology that defied every known law of physics. Ma'am, called Dr. Patel from the sensor station. Long-range detectors are picking up hyperspace signatures at the edge of the system. Multiple contacts. Chen felt her stomach tighten. How many? Still counting. 47 capital ships. Possibly more smaller vessels. They're dropping out of hyperspace near Neptune. Time to Earth orbit? At their current acceleration, approximately 6 days. Chen closed her eyes and took a deep breath. For 3 decades, the Prometheus Project had hoped this day would never come. They had sent warnings, tried to establish peaceful contact, even shared some of their less dangerous discoveries with the galactic community. All of it had been ignored or dismissed. Initiate Prometheus Protocol Alpha, she said quietly. Dr. Patel's hands hesitated over his console. Ma'am, are you certain? Once we begin, there's no going back. They were warned multiple times. We tried diplomacy. We tried gifts of technology. We even tried appealing to their basic sense of survival. Chen's voice hardened. They chose to interpret kindness as weakness. Around the control room, technicians began activating systems that had remained dormant for 3 decades. Deep beneath the lunar surface, ancient machinery began to hum with power that shouldn't exist according to current galactic science. Prometheus Station Alpha is online, reported the chief engineer. Estimated time to full activation, 4 days. Mars Station Beta? Responding, 3 days to full activation. Jupiter Station Gamma? Online. 2 days to full activation. Chen watched as her screens lit up with status reports from installations scattered throughout the solar system. Each one had been built around artifacts left behind by a civilization that had vanished before humans had even evolved. The beings who had constructed these wonders had left behind guardians and safeguards, and humanity had inherited that responsibility. Begin evacuation of all non-essential personnel, Chen ordered. Transport them to the sanctuary worlds. If this goes badly, I want as few people in the line of fire as possible. What about the hegemony fleet? Chen stared at the tactical display showing the approaching alien armada. Each ship represented thousands of lives, beings who believed they were enforcing the natural order of a galaxy where might made right. They had no idea they were flying into a trap that had been waiting for them since before their species had learned to make fire. We'll give them one more chance to withdraw, she said finally. But I don't think they'll take it. They've confused our restraint with inability for too long. As the alien fleet approached the outer planets, automated systems throughout the Sol system continued their ancient programming. The Guardians were awakening, and the galaxy was about to remember why some warnings should never be ignored. On the bridge of the hegemony flagship Eternal Conquest, Admiral Kethvar studied the primitive system ahead of them. His sensors showed a handful of small installations on various moons and asteroids, but nothing that could threaten even a single frigate, let alone an entire battle fleet. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "we're receiving another transmission from the third planet." "On speaker," Kethvar ordered with amusement. The same heavily accented voice filled the bridge. "Hegemony fleet, you are entering sovereign, human space. This is your final warning. Turn back now, or accept the consequences of your actions." The bridge crew erupted in laughter. Several junior officers made jokes about primitive threats and chemical rockets. Kethvar raised a hand for silence. "Send a response," he ordered. "Tell them that the galactic hegemony does not negotiate with primitives. They have 1 standard hour to prepare for unconditional surrender." As his fleet pressed deeper into the system, none of Admiral Kethvar's sensors detected the subtle changes occurring in the ancient installations hidden throughout human space. The countdown had begun, and there would be no stopping it now. The hegemony Third Fleet emerged from hyperspace like predators entering a new hunting ground. 47 capital ships materialized in perfect formation near Neptune's orbit, their hulls gleaming with the distinctive metals of a dozen different worlds. The massive dreadnought Eternal Conquest led the formation, its 4-kilometer length dwarfing even the largest escort vessels. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge's command platform, his 4 arms clasped behind his back as he surveyed. The primitive system spread before them. Through the massive viewport, Neptune's blue surface reflected the light of the distant sun, while his tactical displays showed the fleet's approach vector toward the inner planets. "All ships report ready status," announced Commander Wilex from the communications station. "Battle groups Alpha through Delta maintaining formation. No signs of resistance from local forces." "As expected," Kethvar replied with satisfaction. "Begin detailed scans of the system. I want to know the location of every human installation, every satellite, every piece of debris larger than a dinner plate." The fleet sensor arrays, among the most sophisticated in the galaxy, began their methodical sweep. Lieutenant Vexistar, the ship's science officer, monitored the incoming data with professional interest. "Sir, detecting multiple small installations throughout the system," she reported. "Primitive structures on various moons and asteroids. Most appear to be research stations or communication relays. Military installations? None detected at this range." "Wait." Vexitar paused, her scaled brow furrowing as she studied her displays. "Sir, I'm reading something unusual near Jupiter." The main display shifted to show the gas giant in the distance. At first glance, it appeared normal, but as the sensors focused, an artificial structure became visible against the planet's turbulent atmosphere. "What am I looking at?" Kethvar demanded. "Unknown, sir. It appears to be spherical, roughly 3,000 kilometers in diameter. The composition is unlike anything in our databases." The bridge fell silent as the crew absorbed this information. Commander Ilex was the first to speak. "Sir, That's larger than most moons. How did a primitive species construct something of that magnitude? Kethvar studied the image with growing unease. The structure wasn't crude metal and chemical propulsion like the human ships they'd observed. It was smooth, seamless, and radiated a faint energy signature that their sensors couldn't identify. Could it be natural? Some kind of unusual planetary formation? Negative, sir. The geometry is clearly artificial. Perfect spherical construction, and I'm detecting regular patterns across the surface. This was built, not formed. How long would it take humans to construct such a thing with their current technology? Lieutenant Vextar ran quick calculations. Based on their industrial capacity and primitive construction methods, several thousand years. Perhaps longer. That's impossible. Our intelligence reports show they've only had spaceflight for less than a century. As the fleet continued its approach past Uranus, more anomalies appeared on the sensors. Smaller structures, each roughly the size of a human city, dotted the outer system. They were positioned at strategic points throughout the asteroid belt and near several of the gas giants' moons. Sir, Vextar called out with growing concern, all of these structures are showing the same energy signature. Whatever power source they're using, it's completely unknown to our science. Commander Ilex received an incoming transmission and looked up with surprise. Admiral, we're being hailed. The source appears to be that large structure near Jupiter. From Jupiter, that's impossible. The transmission delay alone should be no delay, sir. Real-time communication despite the distance. Kethvar felt the first stirrings of genuine unease. Real-time communication across such distances required technology far beyond what any known species possessed, including the hegemony itself. Put it through. The voice that emerged from the speakers was calm, measured, and spoke perfect galactic standard without the heavy accent they'd heard in previous human transmissions. Hegemony Fleet, this is Prometheus Station Gamma. You have entered the Sol system despite our warnings. This is your final opportunity to withdraw. Turn your ships around and leave immediately. Admiral Kethvar stepped forward, his voice filled with the authority of 12 galactic civilizations. I am Admiral Kethvar of the Hegemony Third Fleet. You will surrender unconditionally and prepare for occupation. Any resistance will be met with total destruction. There was a long pause before the response came. Admiral, you don't understand what you're dealing with. We're not the primitive species you think we are. Leave now while you still can. Threats from a species that uses chemical rockets? Kethvar's mandibles clicked in amusement. You have 30 standard minutes to begin evacuation of your installations. Any delay will be considered an act of war. We tried to warn you, the AI voice said quietly. Remember that. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Kethvar turned to his tactical officer. What's the status of our weapon systems? All weapons online and ready, sir. We could sterilize every structure in the system within hours. And their defensive capabilities? Unknown, sir. Our sensors can't penetrate whatever material those installations are made from. But given their technological limitations, I doubt they pose any significant threat. As the fleet passed Saturn, more structures became visible. The sheer number was staggering. Dozens of installations scattered throughout the system, all radiating the same mysterious energy signature. Some were built into asteroids, others hung in seemingly empty space, and a few appeared to be integrated with the moons of the outer planets. How did we miss this in our preliminary surveys? Kethvar demanded. Sir, these structures weren't here during our last reconnaissance mission 6 months ago, Vextar reported with obvious confusion. According to our records, the positions where these installations now exist showed only empty space or natural celestial bodies. You're telling me they built dozens of massive structures in 6 months? That's what the data indicates, sir, though I don't see how it's possible. On the hidden side of Earth's moon, Dr. Sarah Chen watched the Hegemony fleet's approach through sensors that could track a grain of sand from across the solar system. The Prometheus Control Center buzzed with activity as technicians monitored the awakening installations throughout the system. Jupiter Station is at 90% activation, reported Dr. Patel. Mars Station reports full operational status. The asteroid belt networks are coming online now. Chen nodded grimly. Any change in the alien fleet's approach? Negative. They're maintaining course and speed toward Earth. Estimated arrival in 46 hours. They really think we're bluffing, she said quietly. 30 years of trying to establish peaceful contact, and they see only weakness. Dr. Rodriguez looked up from the archaeological station. Ma'am, the deep excavation sites are showing increased activity. The artifacts are responding to the activation sequence. Through the observation windows, Chen could see the ancient structures, buried beneath the lunar surface, beginning to glow with soft, pulsing light. The symbols carved into their surfaces, symbols that predated human civilization by millions of years, were becoming more distinct as power flowed through systems that had waited eons for this moment. What about the civilian populations? Evacuations are proceeding on schedule. The sanctuary worlds are accepting refugees, and our deep space transports are ferrying non-essential personnel to safe locations. Chen turned to the master control console, where a single red switch waited beneath a protective cover, the activation key that would fully awaken the Guardian systems and transform the Sol system into something the galaxy had never seen before. Dr. Chen, called the communications officer. We're intercepting hegemony fleet transmissions. They're planning to begin bombardment of our installations as soon as they reach optimal firing range. Time to bombardment range? 38 hours at current speed. Chen stared at the tactical display showing the approaching alien armada. Each ship carried enough firepower to devastate a continent. They came with the absolute confidence of predators who had never encountered anything capable of truly challenging them. Begin final activation sequence for all stations, she ordered, and send one more transmission to the hegemony fleet. What should the message say? Chen was quiet for a long moment, thinking of the beings aboard those ships who had no idea they were flying into a trap that had been set before their species had even evolved. Tell them that some doors once opened can never be closed. Tell them that some warnings should be heeded, and tell them that they are about to discover why humanity has been so patient for so long. As the message transmitted across space, the ancient guardians of the Sol system stirred to full wakefulness. Technology that had slumbered for millions of years began to remember its purpose. The warning had been given and ignored. Now there would be consequences that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Admiral Kethvar received the final human transmission just as his fleet crossed the orbit of Mars. He listened to the words with growing irritation, then deleted the message without bothering to respond. In 36 hours, this primitive system would be under hegemony control, and these defiant humans would learn the price of challenging a galactic civilization. He had no way of knowing that the countdown had already begun, and that his fleet was flying toward a demonstration of power that would rewrite everything the galaxy thought it knew about the nature of technology, warfare, and the true history of the universe itself. The destroyer Talon's Edge had been conducting routine sensor sweeps of the asteroid belt when it simply ceased to exist. One moment the 200-meter warship was transmitting regular status reports, its crew of 150 going about their duties with the casual confidence of a superior military force. The next moment, empty space occupied the coordinates where the ship had been. Admiral Kethvar stared at the tactical display, waiting for some explanation. Ships didn't just disappear. There had to be debris, energy signatures, some indication of what had happened. But the sensors showed nothing except the cold vacuum where one of his destroyers had been operating just minutes before. Communications. Hail the Talon's Edge, he ordered. No response, sir. All frequencies are clear. Could they have jumped to hyperspace? Lieutenant Vextar shook her head. Negative. No hyperspace signatures detected, and their mission parameters specifically prohibited any FTL maneuvers without direct authorization. Commander Wilex looked up from his station with obvious concern. Sir, should we dispatch search and rescue ships? To search for what? Kethvar's voice carried frustration and the first hints of unease. There's nothing there. No debris field, no escape pods, no distress signals. It's as if the ship never existed. Could it be some kind of sensor malfunction? Run full diagnostics on all sensor arrays, Kethvar ordered. and contact the other ships in the battle group. Confirm they also show the Talon's edge is missing. Minutes that followed brought no comfort. Every ship in the fleet confirmed the same impossible fact. The Talon's edge had vanished without a trace. Their most advanced sensors, capable of detecting a single atom of exotic matter across light years, showed absolutely nothing at the destroyer's last known position. "Sir," Vextar reported, "diagnostics show all sensor systems functioning normally. Whatever happened to the Talon's edge, it wasn't a malfunction on our part." Kethvar studied the tactical display, noting the positions of the mysterious human installations scattered throughout the system. The largest structure near Jupiter pulsed with that same unknown energy signature, while smaller installations throughout the asteroid belt showed increased activity. Could the humans have some kind of weapon we're not detecting? "Unknown, sir. Our sensors show no energy discharges, no projectile weapons, no spatial distortions. If they destroyed the Talon's edge, they did it with technology completely outside our understanding." The Admiral was about to respond when another alarm sounded. Lieutenant Commander Zeflek at the tactical station looked up with growing alarm. "Sir, we've lost contact with the frigate Void Render." "Lost contact or lost the ship?" "The ship, sir. Same as before. One moment it was there, the next, nothing." This time Kethvar didn't hesitate. "All ships, maintain tight formation. Increase sensor sweeps to maximum range. I want to know about anything unusual before it happens." But the precautions proved useless. Over the next 4 hours, 7 more ships vanished. First, the heavy cruiser Dominion's Fist disappeared while investigating one of the smaller human installations. Then the frigate Star's Edge simply ceased to exist during a routine patrol. The corvette Night Hunter vanished while conducting a sensor sweep of Mars's moons. Each disappearance followed the same pattern. Normal operations one moment, complete absence the next. No explosions, no debris, no final transmissions. The ships and their crews simply stopped existing, as if they had been plucked from reality by an invisible hand. Panic began to spread through the fleet. These weren't raw recruits or inexperienced crews. These were veteran warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds, faced every kind of weapon the galaxy could produce, but they had never encountered anything like this. "Sir," Commander Ilex's voice was tight with barely controlled fear. "The remaining ship commanders are requesting permission to withdraw to a safe distance." "Safe distance?" Kethvar's mandibles clicked sharply. "Safe from what? We don't even know what we're dealing with." "That's exactly the problem, sir. How do you fight an enemy you can't see, detect, or understand?" Before Kethvar could respond, his science officer called out again. "Admiral, massive energy spike from the Jupiter installation. Whatever it's doing, the power output just increased by several orders of magnitude." The main display shifted to show the enormous spherical structure orbiting the gas giant. Its surface, previously smooth and featureless, now showed complex patterns of light, racing across its hull like neural pathways in a vast brain. The energy readings were off the scale of anything in the hegemony's experience. And the other installations? All showing similar increases in activity. "Sir, I'm detecting spatial distortions around several of our remaining ships." "What kind of distortions?" I'm not sure how to describe it. Space itself seems to be bending around them. The laws of physics are becoming flexible. On the bridge of the light cruiser Stellar Dawn, Captain Morthek watched in growing horror as reality began to shift around his ship. The stars outside the viewports stretched and twisted like reflections in disturbed water. His navigation computers showed impossible readings, displaying coordinates that couldn't exist in normal space. "Engineering report," he commanded, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Sir, our instruments are going crazy. The ship's position keeps changing, but we're not moving. We're somehow existing in multiple locations simultaneously. That's impossible." "Yes, sir. But it's happening anyway." Captain Morthek opened a channel to the flagship. "Eternal Conquest, this is Stellar Dawn. We're experiencing severe spatial anomalies. Request immediate assistance." But the reply that came back was distorted, the words arriving before they were spoken. overlapping with responses to questions that hadn't been asked yet. Time itself was becoming unreliable around the hegemony fleet. Back on the flagship, Admiral Kethvar watched, helplessly as his carefully organized battle formation dissolved into chaos. Ships that appeared to be in normal space on his sensors were reporting impossible experiences. Time running backward, gravity functioning in directions that didn't exist, crew members aging years in the span of minutes before returning to normal. "Sir," Vextar's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm reading something that shouldn't be possible. The human installations aren't just generating energy. They're manipulating the fundamental forces that govern reality." "Explain." "The strong nuclear force, electromagnetism, gravity, even time itself. They're treating the laws of physics like software that can be rewritten." As if to demonstrate her point, the battlecruiser Iron Fist suddenly appeared on sensors at 3 different locations simultaneously, each one equally real according to their instruments. The ship's captain was broadcasting on multiple frequencies, at once his voice reporting different situations from each location. "How is this possible?" Kethvar demanded. "It shouldn't be, sir. No known technology can manipulate reality at this fundamental level. It would require understanding of the universe that's beyond anything we've ever encountered." The answer came not from his science officer, but from the communications array. Every speaker on the bridge activated simultaneously, carrying a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You want to know what's possible?" The voice was calm, almost sad. "We tried to tell you. We warned you that some things should be left alone. Some territories should not be entered. Some species should be approached with respect rather than arrogance." "Who are you?" Kethvar demanded. "What have you done to my ships? We are the custodians of something far older than your civilization. We are the inheritors of technology that your species cannot comprehend. And your ships haven't been destroyed, Admiral. They've been relocated." "Relocated where?" "Somewhere safe. Somewhere they can do no harm while we decide what to do with you." More ships were vanishing now, entire squadrons disappearing in rapid succession. The dreadnought Thunder of Worlds simply faded from existence like a ghost, taking its crew of 5,000 with it. The carrier Star's Wrath and its full complement of fighters vanished, while launching what was supposed to be a preemptive strike on the nearest human installation. "Stop this!" Kethvar roared. "Face us in honorable combat." "Honor?" The voice carried a note of bitter amusement. "You came here to conquer a primitive species. You planned to enslave or destroy 8 billion beings who had done nothing to threaten you. Where was honor in that plan?" Admiral Kethvar looked around his bridge at the remaining crew members. Many were openly terrified now, their training and experience useless against an enemy that treated the fundamental laws of reality as suggestions to be ignored. "What do you want?" "We want you to leave. We want your people to understand that there are consequences for actions. We want the galaxy to remember that some warnings should be heeded. And if we refuse, then you'll join your missing ships, not destroyed, Admiral. Simply removed from this reality and placed somewhere else. Your crews will be safe, fed, and cared for. But they'll remain our guests until your species learns wisdom." As if to emphasize the point, 3 more ships vanished from the fleet roster. The remaining vessels, less than half of the original force, hung in space like lost children, their crews watching reality bend around them in ways that defied every law of physics they had ever learned. Kethvar realized that he was no longer commanding a military operation. He was witnessing a demonstration of power so far beyond his understanding that resistance was not just futile, but meaningless. Whatever the humans had become, whatever technology they had discovered, it placed them so far above the hegemony that the conflict wasn't even a battle. It was a lesson being taught to students who had refused to listen. "Last chance, Admiral," the voice said gently. "Order your remaining ships to withdraw from this system. Leave now, and tell your leaders what you've seen. Help them understand that the galaxy is a far stranger place than they imagined." Admiral Kethvar looked at his tactical display, where the positions of his vanished ships were marked with empty space. 31 vessels and over 40,000 personnel, simply gone. Not destroyed, but removed from existence as easily as erasing marks from a datapad. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Kethvar faced an enemy he could not fight, could not understand, and certainly could not defeat. The humans had tried to warn them, and the hegemony had responded with arrogance and force. Now they were learning that some species had very good reasons for their confidence. The emergency session of the Hegemony Council convened in the same great hall on Zephyria Prime, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Gone was the casual arrogance and mocking laughter that had characterized their previous meeting. The representatives of 12 species sat in tense silence, their various forms of body language all expressing the same emotion: fear. Fleet Admiral Zextar stood where Admiral Kethvar had stood just days earlier, but instead of displaying images of primitive human technology, his holographic projectors showed empty space where a fleet of 47 capital ships should have been. "The third fleet has been completely eliminated," Zextar announced, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "No survivors, no debris, no trace of what happened to 15,000 personnel." Chancellor Mordeth leaned forward in his floating chair, his ancient features showing confusion and disbelief. "Eliminated how? What weapons did the humans use?" "That's the problem, Chancellor. We don't know. Our monitoring stations detected no energy discharges, no projectile weapons, no conventional military activity of any kind. The ship simply disappeared." Queen Zakh's multifaceted eyes glittered with agitation. "Ships don't just disappear. Even primitive chemical explosives leave debris. Energy weapons leave radiation signatures. What aren't you telling us?" Fleet Admiral Zextar manipulated the holographic display, showing the recorded data from the fleet's final hours. "We have sensor logs from the fleet's last transmissions. Ships vanishing one by one. Spatial distortions around the surviving vessels. Reports of reality itself becoming unstable." "Reality becoming unstable?" Ambassador Veltar's scaled features showed skepticism. "What does that even mean?" "According to the surviving sensor data, the humans have technology that can manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe: gravity, time, the strong nuclear force, even the structure of space itself." The silence that followed was deafening. Trade Minister Golvan was the first to speak, his mechanical implants whirring as he processed the information. "That's impossible. No species has that level of technological advancement. The theoretical energy requirements alone would exceed the output of an entire star, and yet the evidence is undeniable," Zextar replied grimly. "We lost contact with the Third Fleet exactly 43 hours after they entered the Sol system. The last transmission was from Admiral Kethvar himself, reporting that ships were vanishing around him, and that space was behaving in ways that violated every known law of physics." General Haxtor of the Warcast Dominion stood abruptly, his scarred features showing the first signs of genuine concern anyone had seen from the veteran warrior. "If this is true, if the humans possess such technology, then we're not dealing with a primitive species at all. We're dealing with something far more advanced than ourselves." "How is that possible?" demanded the crystalline representative of the Silicon Syndicate. "Our intelligence reports were thorough. We observed their technology for decades: chemical rockets, nuclear weapons, primitive computers. Nothing that suggested advanced capability." Fleet Admiral Zextar activated another holographic display, this one showing detailed scans of the Sol system taken after the fleet's disappearance. "Our long-range sensors have detected massive structures throughout the human system. Installations, the size of moons built from materials we can't identify, radiating energy signatures that don't match any known technology. Where did these structures come from?" "That's what we're trying to determine. Our archives show no evidence of such constructions during previous surveillance missions. Either they were hidden by technology beyond our ability to detect, or they were built impossibly quickly." Chancellor Mordeth raised his hand for silence. "There must be an explanation. Contact our archaeological teams on the outer worlds. Have them review their findings for any evidence of similar technology." The response came more quickly than anyone expected. Dr. Yethnar, the Hegemony's chief archaeologist, appeared via holographic projection within hours of the Council's request. Her normally calm demeanor showed obvious excitement and fear. "Chancellor, we've been reviewing our excavation sites across 12 worlds, focusing on the oldest artifacts we've discovered. What we've found is disturbing." "Explain." "The deepest layers of our archaeological sites, the ones dating back millions of years, all show evidence of the same technology the humans are apparently using. Structures that manipulate space-time, materials that shouldn't exist according to current physics, energy sources that tap into fundamental forces." The council chamber erupted in various sounds of disbelief and alarm. Dr. Yethnar waited for quiet before continuing. "We've always assumed these artifacts were natural formations, or the result of unknown geological processes. We never considered that they might be technological in origin, because they seemed so far beyond any possible scientific achievement." "Are you suggesting that the humans didn't develop this technology themselves?" asked Ambassador Veltar. "I'm suggesting something far more unsettling. The artifacts we found on our worlds are identical to the energy signatures we're detecting from the human installations. Either the humans have somehow duplicated technology that predates galactic civilization by millions of years, or what? Or they found the source." Before anyone could respond to this revelation, the chamber's communication systems activated without authorization. Every screen, every speaker, every holographic projector suddenly carried the same signal. The voice that emerged spoke perfect, galactic standard. But there was something different about it now, something that carried the weight of vast age and knowledge. "Greetings, Hegemony Council. I am Dr. Sarah Chen, Director of the Prometheus Project. I believe it's time we had a proper conversation." Security officers throughout the chamber reached for their weapons, but Chancellor Mordeth raised a hand to stop them. "How are you accessing our communication systems?" "The same way we've been monitoring your civilization for the past 3 centuries. The same way we've been watching your expansion and conquest of peaceful species. The same way we know about the mass graves on Altair 7 and the slave camps on Rigel Prime." The accusations hung in the air like physical blows. Several council members shifted uncomfortably, knowing that the humans somehow knew about their most closely guarded secrets. "You want to know what happened to your fleet," Dr. Chen continued. "You want to know how a primitive species could defeat the might of 12 galactic civilizations. The answer is simple. We're not primitive, and we're not alone." The main holographic display activated, showing images that defied comprehension. Vast underground cities carved from solid rock, their architecture unlike anything any known species had ever produced. Technology that seemed to blend seamlessly with living organisms. Symbols and writings that predated the oldest known civilizations by eons. 73 years ago, human archaeologists discovered ruins buried beneath the surface of our world. Structures that had been waiting for millions of years, built by beings we call the predecessors. They were the first sapient species in this galaxy, and they achieved a level of technological advancement that makes our current science look like children playing with sticks. More images appeared. Humans working alongside machines of impossible complexity, studying artifacts that seemed to respond to thought rather than physical manipulation, learning from archives that contained the accumulated knowledge of beings who had transcended the normal limitations of physics. The predecessors didn't disappear, Dr. Chen explained. They evolved beyond the need for physical existence. But before they transcended, they built safeguards. They left behind guardians and protectors, technology designed to prevent younger species from making the same mistakes that had nearly destroyed the galaxy in the distant past. Queen Zacht clicked her mandibles in agitation. "You're claiming to be these guardians?" "We're claiming to have inherited that responsibility. The predecessors left behind tests, challenges that would identify species capable of wisdom and restraint. Humanity found those tests 73 years ago and spent decades learning to understand them. We discovered that we weren't meant to conquer the galaxy. We were meant to protect it." "Protect it from what?" demanded General Haxtor. "From species like yours. From civilizations that measure success by how many worlds they can conquer, how many beings they can enslave, how much of the galaxy they can control. The predecessors faced the same temptations, and they almost destroyed everything in their pursuit of ultimate power. Trade Minister Golvan's mechanical components whirred as he processed this information. You're saying the hegemony is a threat to galactic stability? I'm saying that any species that responds to peaceful warnings with military force, that sees diplomacy as weakness and conquest as strength, is following the same path that led to the near destruction of all life in this galaxy millions of years ago? The images shifted again, showing the hegemony's own expansion over the past several centuries. Worlds burned by orbital bombardment, populations enslaved or eliminated, entire species reduced to servitude. From the human perspective, the hegemony wasn't a galactic civilization. It was a cancer that needed to be stopped. You're missing. Fleet hasn't been destroyed, Dr. Chen continued. The personnel are alive and unharmed, relocated to a world where they can live in peace while we decide what to do next. They're being treated well, fed properly, and given access to educational materials that might help them understand the true nature of the galaxy they thought they ruled. What do you want? Chancellor Mordeth asked quietly. We want you to stop. We want the hegemony to end its expansion, release its conquered worlds, and begin the long process of learning how to coexist peacefully with other species. We want you to understand that the galaxy is not yours to control, and if we refuse, then you'll discover that every world you've conquered contains the same predecessor ruins that we found on Earth. You'll learn that the safeguards aren't limited to our solar system. You'll find out what happens when a species refuses to listen to reason and continues down the path of destruction and conquest. As if to emphasize the point, reports began flooding in from across hegemony space. Ancient ruins that had been dormant for eons were showing signs of activity. Installations buried beneath the surfaces of conquered worlds were beginning to emit the same energy signatures detected in the Sol system. The galaxy's oldest and most mysterious archaeological sites were waking up. The choice is yours, Dr. Chen said as her transmission began to fade. Learn wisdom, or learn the hard way that some powers in this galaxy are far older and more patient than your young civilization can imagine. Your fleet will be returned when you've proven that you can be trusted with the responsibility of space travel. Until then, they remain our guests. The transmission ended, leaving the Hegemony Council in stunned silence. Representatives of 12 supposedly advanced civilizations sat like children, who had just learned that their playground was actually someone else's carefully tended garden, and that they had been making far too much noise. For the first time in their history, the galactic hegemony faced a power they could not comprehend, could not fight, and certainly could not conquer. The humans had tried to warn them, had offered peaceful coexistence, had shown remarkable restraint in the face of arrogance and aggression. Now they were learning that patience and wisdom were not signs of weakness, but evidence of strength beyond their wildest imagination. 6 months after the disappearance of the Third Fleet, the galaxy had become a very different place. The news of the hegemony's encounter with humanity had spread through unofficial channels, carried by traders, smugglers, and the few independent species that had managed to maintain their freedom despite the great power's expansion. On Zephyria Prime, Chancellor Mordeth stood in his private chambers, staring out at a sky that no longer seemed as secure as it once had. Reports continued to arrive from across hegemony space, each one more unsettling than the last. Archaeological teams on 17 different worlds had confirmed the presence of predecessor technology, most of it showing signs of increased activity since the Sol incident. Chancellor, his aide announced through the communication system, you have an urgent message from the Outer Rim territories. Mordeth sighed and activated the holographic display. The image that appeared showed General Haxtor, but the veteran warrior looked haggard and uncertain, his usual confidence replaced by something approaching fear. Chancellor, we have a situation on Rigel Prime. The slave mining operations have encountered complications. What kind of complications? The ancient ruins beneath the primary mining complex have activated. Our workers report that the tunnels are filled with the same energy signatures detected in the human system. Worse, the slave populations are claiming that the installations are communicating with them. Communicating how? Direct mental contact, sir. The slaves report receiving information about their history, their culture, their rights as sapient beings. The installations are apparently teaching them about galactic law, their legal status as prisoners of war, and their right to freedom, under several interstellar treaties that predate the hegemony. Chancellor Mordeth felt a chill run through his ancient frame. What's the current status of the mining operations? Completely shut down, sir. The slaves have organized themselves into a peaceful resistance movement. They're not violent, not causing any damage, but they absolutely refuse to work. They're requesting immediate transport to neutral worlds where they can establish their own governments. Similar reports were arriving from mining worlds, agricultural colonies, and manufacturing centers throughout hegemony space. Ancient technology that had slumbered for millions of years was awakening, and its primary function seemed to be education. Enslaved populations were learning about their rights, their history, and their potential for self-governance. On the war world of Kepler Station, Admiral Zextar faced his own crisis. The fortress that had served as the hegemony's primary military training center was built around what archaeologists had always assumed were natural crystal formations. Now those crystals were active, projecting holographic lessons about the history of warfare, the cost of conquest, and the advantages of peaceful cooperation. Young recruits who had come to learn the arts of subjugation and control were instead receiving education about diplomacy, cultural exchange, and the mathematical principles that proved cooperation was more beneficial than conflict. The training programs were becoming impossible to maintain when the recruits kept asking uncomfortable questions about the morality of their intended careers. "Sir," reported his chief of staff, "we're receiving similar reports from military installations across 7 sectors. The ancient sites are all active and they're all broadcasting the same message. Violence is inefficient, conquest is ultimately self-defeating, and sustainable civilization requires cooperation rather than domination." Admiral Zextar stared at the holographic displays showing the spreading influence of the awakened installations. How many worlds are affected? Current count is 43 and rising. Every world with significant predecessor ruins is experiencing the same phenomenon. The installations aren't hostile, sir. They're not attacking anyone or damaging our infrastructure. They're just teaching. Teaching what? History, mostly. The true history of galactic civilization, the rise and fall of hundreds of species over millions of years, the pattern of expansion, conquest, overreach, and collapse that has repeated itself countless times, and the alternatives that lead to long-term survival and prosperity. Meanwhile, in the Sol system, Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of Prometheus Station Alpha, watching as transport ships arrived and departed from the hidden sanctuary worlds. The hegemony personnel who had been relocated from the vanished fleet were adapting to their new circumstances with varying degrees of success. "How are our guests adjusting?" she asked Dr. Patel, who had been coordinating the relocation efforts. "Better than expected, honestly. The initial shock and anger have mostly given way to curiosity. Many of them are genuinely interested in learning about predecessor technology and history. Admiral Kethvar has been particularly cooperative." "Really? I would have expected him to be the most resistant." "He was at first. But once he understood the scope of what we're dealing with, the age and sophistication of the technology, he began asking different questions. He wants to know how we learned to use it responsibly." Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. The sanctuary worlds had been designed by the predecessors as teaching environments, places where aggressive species could be safely contained, while they learned the lessons necessary for peaceful coexistence. The process could take decades, but it was far more effective than punishment or destruction. "Any word from the Hegemony Council?" "They've been remarkably quiet. Our monitoring stations indicate massive internal discussions, policy reviews, and some kind of restructuring effort. Several conquered worlds have already been granted independence and the slave labor programs appear to be ending." Through the observation windows, Chen could see the massive installations scattered throughout the solar system. The predecessor technology was designed to be self-regulating, activating only when needed to maintain galactic stability. For 73 years, humanity had been the sole custodians of this responsibility. Now the awakening sites across hegemony space suggested that the guardianship was expanding. Dr. Chen, called the communications officer, we're receiving a transmission from Zephyria Prime. Chancellor Mordeth is requesting direct communication. Put him through. The holographic image of the aged Zephyrian leader appeared in the center of the control room. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by something that might have been humility. Dr. Chen, I believe it's time for formal negotiations. What kind of negotiations, Chancellor? The kind that determine whether the galactic hegemony continues to exist, or whether we disband entirely and allow our member species to determine their own futures. Chen was quiet for a moment, considering the implications. What are you proposing? A complete restructuring of galactic civilization. An end to the conquest model, the establishment of voluntary confederations based on mutual benefit rather than forced submission, and the gradual return of autonomy to all conquered worlds, and your military forces will be converted to exploration and rescue services. We've realized that the galaxy is far larger and more dangerous than we understood. There are threats out there that make our petty territorial disputes look like children arguing over toys. What? Threats? Chancellor Mordeth's expression grew even more serious. The predecessor archives that our archaeological teams have accessed contain warnings about things from outside our galaxy, entities that consume entire star systems, machine intelligences that convert matter into computation, forces that make the old hegemony look peaceful by comparison. Dr. Chen felt a chill of recognition. The deeper predecessor archives on Earth contained similar warnings, hints of threats so vast that they required the cooperation of all galactic civilizations to address. The conquest mentality that had dominated galactic politics for centuries would be useless against such dangers. The predecessors prepared for these threats, Mordeth continued. They built defenses, warning systems, response protocols. But those systems require cooperation on a galactic scale. They can't function if civilizations are too busy fighting each other to work together. You're suggesting an alliance? I'm suggesting survival. The age of conquest is over, Dr. Chen. We've learned that from your people's demonstration. Now we need to learn how to work together before something arrives that makes our local conflicts irrelevant. Chen looked around the control room at her colleagues, scientists and engineers who had dedicated their lives to understanding and protecting the legacy of beings who had transcended the need for physical existence millions of years ago. The choice ahead was clear. Help guide the transition to a cooperative galactic civilization, or watch as petty conflicts left everyone vulnerable to threats beyond imagination. We're willing to help, she said finally. But the changes will need to be genuine. No more conquest, no more slavery, no more treating other species as resources to be exploited. Agreed. We've seen what happens when we ignore warnings from those who understand the bigger picture. 3 years later, Admiral Cathavar stood on the observation deck of a very different kind of ship. The exploration vessel New Horizons was part of the reformed Galactic Cooperative, dedicated to scientific research and peaceful contact with unknown civilizations. His crew included members of 15 different species, all working together toward common goals. Sir, reported his science officer, a former hegemony slave who had earned her position through merit rather than conquest, we're detecting signs of an artificial structure in the next system. The energy signatures match predecessor technology. Another Guardian installation? Possibly. Or something else. The predecessor network spans multiple galaxies, sir. We're still learning the full scope of what they built. Cathavar nodded, remembering his time on the sanctuary world where he had learned the true history of galactic civilization. The cycle of rise, expansion, conflict, and fall had repeated itself countless times over millions of years. The predecessors had broken that cycle by learning to transcend their physical limitations and work together on a scale that spanned not just galaxies, but entire clusters of galaxies. Set course for the structure, he ordered. Let's see what else we can learn. As the New Horizons adjusted its heading, Cathavar reflected on how much had changed since that day when the Hegemony Council had dismissed humanity's warnings. The galaxy was no longer a hunting ground for aggressive civilizations. It was a classroom, a testing ground, and ultimately a nursery for species learning to take their place in something far grander than they had ever imagined. The warnings had been heeded, the lesson learned, and the real work was just beginning. Somewhere in the vast darkness between galaxies, ancient threats stirred in response to the growing cooperation among younger species. The predecessors had prepared for this moment, but success would require every species working together with a unity that transcended the old patterns of conquest and domination. The age of cooperation had begun, and with it, the next phase of galactic evolution. The humans had proven that wisdom and patience were greater strengths than force and arrogance. Now it was time to see if the rest of the galaxy could learn the same lesson before it was too late. In the deep archives of the Prometheus Project, Dr. Chen continued her work as guardian and teacher, watching over a galaxy learning to grow up. The next challenge would make the hegemony's expansion look like a minor disagreement between neighbors. But for the first time in millions of years, the galaxy's children were ready to face it together.